All right, welcome everybody to the live stream for Saturday, March 18th. My name is McLean, and today we're going to be talking about Photoshop. And what we'll be doing in Photoshop is making a mask pattern like this, or further down the line a little bit more like this, with the dye sublimation and after really refining the pattern and everything. So for this mask pattern in this stream, I actually went ahead and already made a Photoshop pattern and everything, and I transferred it over on the fabric and sewed together this test print. So, I've already got this for a reference, but that'll be good because I'll just go back and start again at the beginning of that process here in Photoshop. I started the stream a little late today, mainly because sorry, looking at the comments here, making sure. Okay, good, cool. Everything is lined up here. I started a little late today here because we've got some neat stuff here. I'll show you. We're going to be working in Photoshop today. Here you can see I've got just a picture of Spider-Man. Here, I'll move down into actual Photoshop mode here. Just got a picture of Spider-Man, and you can see above me here this neat little app that shows you half of my keyboard and then also shows you what my mouse is doing. There were a couple of apps that had the full keyboard, but it wasn't showing what the mouse was doing. And in Photoshop, that's pretty important. I'm scrolling right now and I'm going up and down, but then if you hold Alt, as you can see I'm doing there, and then scroll, you're going in, you're zooming in, and if you hold Control, you're scrolling side to side, and then if you just scroll regularly, you're just going up and down. So this stream picks up right where we left off on the last stream, and I want it to just be a general intro to Photoshop. What do you do to make a pattern? Like, what tools do you use? Because you could use the paintbrush and the select tool like you do in Microsoft Paint, but it would take forever, and then it would be really hard to modify your pattern after the fact. In the last stream, we made a tin foil and masking tape, just super basic representation of the pattern. And this is, wrinkled and crumpled up because it had a lot of curved shapes to it, a lot of spherical shapes of the head. So it had to just be pressed flat. But it's a very direct representation of the surface area that's covered by this pattern. And it has all the lines and the things like that. And then once we made this and then cut it apart, I want to talk really briefly that some people ask, well, if I don't have a face shell, how can I make one of those patterns without, having a face shell to build it on top of? Well, you'll need a mannequin head or any kind of you can get styrofoam mannequin heads that are pretty cheap, and then you just have to build it up on your head. But you can build a face shell, kind of like a proximity of a face shell, because it doesn't have to be perfect since you're making your own mask pattern. You can just use some garbage or junk mail here, just the stuff that you get in the mail every day. I actually just save it. I save a stack of it in a cupboard above my garbage bags. And then a plastic bag from a grocery store or any store really. And you take your mannequin head. I'm not going to take off my face shell here, so I'm just going to leave this on and kind of build on top, and you'll have to kind of just go with me on that. You take your mannequin head like this, and you, here, I'll go back to this slightly larger view. Okay, so you take your mannequin head like this, imagine it doesn't already have a face shell on it, and you would start taking this junk mail and just take it and crunch it up and build the design of the face shell and the shape of it with the junk mail. It looks really big and bulky and bulged out right now, but you take your masking tape here. I'm not too worried about taping onto this red mask here. It's a sort of a junk mask, not too much to worry about. Hey Bengi City's here. Shout out to you. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm not looking at the people watching. A lot of these are hopefully designed in hindsight for how you can just come in and build your own suit. So I wanted to get going on this project because I know that it's, I've already started here, so I've got to continue the work, and continue building this suit. Okay, so, right, again, what I'm doing here, this probably looks weird. I'm just building up on top of, like, say this were a mannequin head, and this is how I would build my face shell. It's big and bulky right now, but what you would do is you just continue taking tape, and, the places, because, like, if you look at Spider-Man's, head and face shell shape, it's usually kind of like bulged out around the eyes just to make that curve a little smoother. So you just need to take your tape and your paper and kind of build up in those areas, and then you press down, and that's how you're kind of building up the shape of the face shell. And then you can start doing the foil and the masking tape process that I did in the last stream. So that's something I wanted to talk about in the last stream in reference to if you don't have a face shell, because I did want to talk about that, because I know that not most people actually don't have face shells. But what you can also do is buy a face shell from, there are a lot of sellers out there that are making face shells these days. So you can get a face shell. I think the ASM1 face shell is the closest to the MCU right now, and that's actually the one that I'm using, and probably I'm just going to go ahead and use. Okay, now another quick thing before we go into... Hey, Keller just asked if I'm going to be making a face shell and lenses for the MCU pattern. Yeah, it's funny, I just said I was using the ASM1, but my plan is I'm going to go into Blender and make the 3D file, and I'm going to scan this ASM1 shell the same way I scanned the ASM2 shell and got a little miniature version of that file. I'm going to scan the same one for the ASM1, and I'll be able to edit it and, kind of change a couple aspects of it. Like, I think the shape of it is a little different to get to the MCU shape. But yeah, I'll do that because then I'll be able to actually sell the moving lens kit, essentially. You'll have to assemble it yourself, but I've already opened a Shapeways store, and what Shapeways stores do is you have your 3D printable file, and Shapeways has a bunch of really high quality printers that can print larger files. So Shapeways prints off the shell. The fee is set up based on the material costs plus whatever I charge in the store. And so you would be buying the face shell for the MCU mask, the frames, all of the different lens, moving iris to the lenses components. There are 6 components, no, maybe even 8. It's going to be an intense task to design all of them that they fit really flat and snug, because I actually saw on Reddit earlier today someone had a mechanical moving lens mask posted onto our GIFs, and I'm not sure who made it. It was a really cool attempt at the moving lenses, but they only had 2 irises, one moving on top and one moving on the bottom, and you really can't get a super fluid shape out of that in the movement. And then also they had it really sunk in. They had like ½ an inch, and I had that problem too on my first test moving lens mask. It's hard not to have that, but I think when you do Arduino stuff, my moving lenses don't have any Arduino components. It's more like puppetry. Think puppetry like a puppetry mask that has controls that come out the back of it. So mine doesn't have any Arduinos or motors or servos or anything. So it's going to be a lot cheaper to put it together than some of those you see out there that they've gotten good progress, but I really don't see how they're ever going to be able to have a face shell with all of the necessary moving components and not have it just be ½ an inch bigger than that person's head. Every time it always looks about ½ an inch bigger, and the eyes are sunk in about ½ an inch. But the puppetry one that I'm about to do, I've got some ideas with how basically it's going to be like the lens of an actual human eye, in that you have your eyelids that close a little bit, and if your eye wasn't there, your eyelids would probably just close flat and not have the kind of curved shape that they take on when they close. But your eye being there kind of pushes them and forces them to take that curved shape. And so that's going to kind of be the same philosophy with the iris that I'm doing here. And I tried it with the first mask, but I wasn't too successful. But I've got a pretty good plan of how I'm going to make the clear lens component inside actually push everything and be nice and flat, and then hopefully everything still works really smoothly, because the struggle there is if you're pushing everything and kind of compressing and pushing it against the lens, then it all has to, all of the mechanical components inside have to work harder. They have to struggle against the friction of that lens. So hopefully that lens will be smooth enough and glossy enough that the components will be able to kind of just freely move on top. I think it'll be pretty cool. That's why I'm trying to hurry through this project. So speaking of that, hurrying through, at the end of the last stream, we had taken this mannequin head and done the hey Flub, shout out to Flub, he made it. At the end of the last stream, we had taken this mannequin head and we had made this pattern, sort of pattern out of tin foil and masking tape. We cut it off in all of the areas that we want the seams. You know, you cut it in the logical areas that will make it easiest to lay out flat, but then also look best when it's, you know, in pattern form. And it kind of just takes experience to figure out what that's going to be. But for ours, we cut that off, and then we crushed it down and we laid it all flat and put some scale up next to it, and took a picture with the pattern laid flat and the scale right next to it. We took a picture from above, and here is we're in Photoshop here. So if once you're in Photoshop, I took that picture, and now I want to go ahead and open it in Photoshop. So basically, simply enough, I've got the picture here in this folder for the stream I set up and the pattern already saved. But you find your picture after you've emailed it or just transferred it from a digital camera, and open it up, and you can see that I've got basically everything I need. Can't zoom. Okay, there we go. I've got basically everything I need in this photo. Some of you are probably like, ooh, like screen grabbing right now to get the pattern. Like, that's fine. I mean, I'll have the pattern for sale with all the details and things I do. I mean, that's the point of this stream, is that quick note, you know, I'm happy to help everyone out with their pattern and stuff like that. Just don't like try to run off and like going like, oh, I made this pattern all by myself. Like that's really kind of the lousy thing to do in the situation, or to even passively take credit. To basically build your pattern along with me here, and then, you know, when you share images of it, and, you know, people happen to really like it, then you just go, thanks. You know, it's like, well, you know, I helped out a little bit. So in those kinds of situations, I appreciate the shout out. Most people are really good about, you know, it just takes a quick little, like, you know, help from McLean Krieger, or, you know, shell by McLean Krieger, and an Instagram tag or something like that, and that's awesome, because it points people kind of in my direction adequately. It's when people are posting pictures of work that I've helped out with, or patterns, you know, and they're doing all the work, all the lion's share of the work, but it still is a little unfortunate when you're posting stuff and not mentioning that maybe I made the pattern, and then, you know, people kind of passively just kind of assume that you made it. Flubdub asked for a good place to buy Lycra. Just go online and look for it. Look for Lycra, and look for 80% polyester, 20% Lycra. That's usually the best mixture of where to find, you know, just standard Lycra like that. Like if we were to just go right here, this is, sorry, quick aside, I'm like ADD here and not actually getting to Photoshop. But you could just go to Google here and do Lycra poly roll, and eBay's good. I bet you could find a lot of good stuff on eBay. So discount fabric 4-way stretch polyester Lycra spandex, and look at all the colors they've got. Got that color, and they've got that color, and they've got that color, and you know, they've got all these colors, and you can buy it with PayPal, and I mean, the problem is that you're probably asking for dye sublimation. When it gets to dye sublimation, you do have to find yard or rolls, places where you're going to be able to buy a whole roll. And if you're buying a whole roll of spandex, I've found like the best price roll at like $200 or $300. So and then you have to go to the printer. So you really it's hard. You might be better off just trying to find someone who can print on colored fabric. And since I want to do this MCU pattern, and I'm gonna want to probably print it onto colored fabric for my first dye sublimation, I'm pretty sure I'm probably going to be ordering colored fabric, like a run, in the next month or so. I'd say that's my kind of generous estimate, is that in the next month or so I'll be doing a run of both my prints on colored fabric, and then I think I'll probably take on other people's prints as well, just to get, because the more I can get, the more kind of economy there is to it. Okay, so that's how you find a printer or find rolls of prints or whatever. Okay, so back to Photoshop really quick. What we have got here is our image here. It took in the all of the sizes of like that my camera took. So if you go up to image here, the image tab, and go to image size, you can see that it's 72 pixels an inch. That's actually pretty good for printing. 72, around 72 is kind of like the standard for what printers are best at, and that keeps the file size lower. Because if you're doing like 300 pixels per inch, that's when the files get huge. They get a gigabyte or something, because you're dealing with a large file size when you're dealing with print files. And that's what we're dealing with here, so I want to be thorough. So you can see that the image size itself is about 17 inches, and the width is about 22 inches, and then we've got 72 pixels per inch. That's great. I actually just want to go ahead and copy everything. So I'm going to go ahead and I did select A to copy, or to select everything, and then Control C to copy everything, and then Control Shift V will paste in place. Control V pastes as well, and it probably pastes in place too because it's the size of the image, but Control Shift V will typically paste in place if you have something selected and are copying and pasting it. If you guys have any questions with Photoshop or what I'm designing as I'm going along, feel free to ask. I'll try to look down periodically and answer those for you. Okay, so I've got this copied already. I don't want that last layer I did. Just Control Z on that. But I do just want to delete this background layer because it can't be edited or manipulated. It's just kind of locked there. It probably can. I'll say really quick, I'm no expert on Photoshop. I'm fairly self-taught in a lot of aspects, so there are certain areas of Photoshop that I know nothing about, but I do know how to make print files with a couple techniques that I've learned through other tutorials that have been great. So going back to image size really fast, one thing I want to do, I actually want to make my resolution here 100 pixels per inch. Or maybe 99. 100's fine. The reason for that is that now when I use my brush here, when you change the size of your brush, it wants to know pixels a lot of times. So if I say 50 pixels, now that I've changed my image pixel dot per inch size, now that circle here, if we go right up to the edge here, you can see the ruler up on the edge. You can see it's half an inch. You have 8 right here, 9 right here, and so this circle is exactly half an inch. And that comes into play later when we're doing outlines and stuff. You know, I can take an outline and then make another outline around it exactly half an inch based on just that brush size. Of course, there's probably more detailed ways, but it really comes into play when we're doing certain aspects of the pattern later. Also, Photoshop is probably frustrating to a lot of people because when you press Control Z, like you do in a lot of programs. Usually you just keep pressing Control Z and that undoes everything. But in Photoshop that kind of goes forward and backward. You need to press Control Z and then Control Alt Z to continue to go backwards. You need to hold Control and Alt and then hit Z in order to continue to undo things. So really quick, the next thing we have to do here is we have to get the scales the same, because luckily this picture is actually pretty close to the correct scale as far as you can see that my circle up here is 1/2 an inch. So you can see that the picture is only a little too small. It's you know, that 1/2 an inch circle is a little bit bigger in that reference we have underneath there. So thankfully that's not going to be too much to do as far as scaling it. So the first thing I'm going to do to scale it actually is I'm going to select this rectangle path tool over here. I'm just going to quickly make a rectangle that kind of actually, you know, we don't need to deal with paths yet, because I need to discuss paths kind of as their own thing. So first of all, what I'm going to do, I'm going to click up here and the ruler up here. If you click in here and bring your cursor down, you actually make a line, a ruler, a unit of just a ruler line essentially. And if you don't see these inch markers on around the sides, just go up to View, and you show rulers. You can hide them, and then also bring them back. And there's also some quick commands to hide the rulers that you make. Alt semicolon, I believe, or no, Control semicolon. Yeah, there we go. Hides and brings the rulers back, but that's kind of advanced. So anyway, these rulers are really helpful because they mark, you know, certain things on the image size, and you can move them around. Whatever tool you have, if you hold Control, you can edit those rulers around a little bit. Right now, I'm going to try and move mine right onto the 4-inch mark here. I'm trying to line that ruler right up with 4 inches. If I turned on Snap, it would be easier to get the ruler to line up. Snap is this guy right here, but it infuriates me. I just kind of hate Snap because you forget to turn it on and off, and it is really annoying when you do. So we put that first. I'm trying to get 12 inches here. 12 inches marked between this line and a line below it. So I started it at 4 inches because there's a little bit of material up above. And I'm going to go down to 16 inches then. So those two lines right there equal exactly 12 inches apart. And I know for a fact that on this cutting board, this outer square is 12 inches apart. So I know that, you know, I need to resize this image enough that those lines line up with these blue lines. I do also know though that that's going to make the mask spill out of the image size. And we want a lot of like work area here. We don't want the image to spill out. We don't want to be working right up against the image. So I back up to image here at the top here, and I've already shown you image size here, and there's some things to look at and change there. But this time we're going to hit canvas size. So canvas size will change that outer perimeter of the image without really editing anything inside. So the current size of the image is 22.67 inches wide. Sorry to all you metric people out there, but we're using the grand old American inch system. I just like inches because they're easier to divide multiple times in certain areas, and also because I grew up with it. But so we've got 22.67 inches currently, and that width is pretty good. I'm not too worried about the image going over. I will change the width though, just so that I can kind of demonstrate the next thing. So I want it 30 inches, and then the height definitely needs to be changed. I'm thinking probably also 30 inches. Like a square workplace would probably be good for this. So right now, if I hit OK, it's just going to move out directly, you can see this little diagram here in the center that has all of these little square segments. It's just going to spread outward in every direction. I kind of don't need the stuff on this right side right now. Well, actually I do. I do need some space on the right side for when I flip the mask over and make that file. So I want to grow it from, stick to this side. So now it's only going to grow from those edges. And actually just go to this top corner. So now it's just going to grow, increase on that right edge and on the bottom. So hit OK. And so now I've got my new canvas size that is a lot different than the former one. So I hit V, and V is a layer moving tool. So it just allows you to move whatever layer you have selected, and that's only this image right now. So I'm lining up my ruler line, getting all the way into this close-up view, lining up my ruler line with the line on the mat underneath. It's going to move a little bit when I transform this. So this is an important thing to know about Photoshop. It's time to change this image and edit it, or transform it essentially. That's Control T. I don't know if you can see T on my little keyboard I've got. No, I don't think you can see T. So I'll try to mention when I'm hitting buttons that are cut off on my little miniature keyboard above me. It's mainly for like game streaming, I think. Those are kind of buttons for certain games where you move around and do a lot of stuff like that. So you'd see the gamer, what buttons he was pressing. Works really well for Photoshop. I just need a couple more buttons up there. Okay, so I've hit Control T, and now I've got little bounding box. And remember, I'm hitting Alt and Scroll. That's important because when you're in this this transform mode, you kind of lose access to some features, like some tools and stuff, like the ability to alter some layers. So it's good to be able to zoom in and out. So I know that this ruler is like right near the bottom of my image. So my image has to be a lot bigger here. So I'm going to grab this bottom corner, and then once I grab it, I'm going to hold Shift, and that's going to constrain the movement to, you know, a scale. So both are moving similarly. If I let go of Shift, I can kind of go crazy with it and transform it however I want. But if I hold Shift, then I'm sliding now. I'm going over the line a little bit because you can see over here that because the scale has changed now. You know, it doesn't. There has to be a way to move the point there so that it grows from. It's locked and constrained from that point, but I just don't know how. I've never figured it out. I know how to do it in Blender because it's pretty important in 3D programs. But so basically, I've lined up my 12-inch ruler marks here with the mat underneath, and that is pretty much the key to the scale, because now since I have a 30-inch by 30-inch Photoshop file and I've got this picture of the mask scaled to the 12 inches, you know, scaled inside of the file, now anything I do with this thing is all to scale. Anything in this inside, this is basically my virtual desktop at this point. Everything is to scale and sized correctly. So hit this checkbox up here or enter, and that solidifies the change. I'm gonna go ahead and move it around a little bit so I have some you know, space on the edges. Okay, and so I've got this over here on the side here. This is your layers layer tab on this side toolbar. If you don't see it, maybe you might be in one of these different Photoshop modes here. Like there's design and painting, and you can see things are like popping up and moving around because those are each for different purposes with Photoshop. So maybe you might be in a different thing. You probably are here, and you probably hopefully you've figured out the background thing I did quickly, but I had a background layer that was locked. It had the little locked icon next to it, and I've never like really figured out how to unlock that. You have to have another layer before you can unlock or delete a singular layer. So that's why I did Select A, which makes the entire canvas selected, and then Control C, and then Control V, and then you have another one. That's a good example. So I hit Control V, and it just pasted the image right in the middle. I'm going to hit Control Z to go backwards. Now I'm going to hit, since still that whole area is selected, Control Shift V will paste it into place. So you can see that when I hide that, they're both basically the exact same copy because I did Control Shift V, not just Control V. So get rid of that because I don't need it. So all I have here is my little reference image. All I need to do is come over here, and rather than having everything be layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, that gets really confusing, and especially if you're designing a dye sublimation print that has a lot of different designs and layers and things going on, you want to name everything. So you can either right click on it, and you could rename, I guess you can't. Well, anyway, to rename it, I always just do a left click on the text itself of the layer. See, now I can edit it to mask ref. Just something easy and you know, quick to get a handle on. Cool. Thanks, Meat Man. I appreciate that. Meat Man just said, fun fact about Photoshop, if you hit Command J, which is Mac, and I guess that's Control J on Windows. I'll try it here since I've got my mask ref layer selected. So Control J. Neat. So that just did exactly what I do with Control C, Control Shift V. So like there are so many little ins and outs of Photoshop like that I don't even know. But I know I've gotten a pretty cohesive workflow, you know, through like tutorials and stuff, because there's like I kind of hit a limit of like what I could learn about like the path tool and stuff through tutorials, it seemed like. But there's a lot of little things I know, but not a lot I don't know as well. So just keep that in mind when you're learning from me. Is that, you know, I'm very self-taught. I'm a skilled amateur, I would say, and so I think I have something to offer. But especially as, you know, someone who has been self-taught, a lot of times in these streams I'll be going through like, how do you learn how to use a program, because I might not know how to use it. So I think that's something that's important to learn how to do for most stuff in this kind of thing. So thanks a lot, Meat Man. I appreciate that. Pierce just did a shout out. Hey Pierce, he just got his shell and took some cool pictures with it. Glad you like it. I'm excited to get shells going on Shapeways. I need to get that. I think that's, right now, this MCU project and getting those shells available on Shapeways, because even the people that are waiting for the shell from me, I think that Shapeways is a good solution for them, because they'll get the shell, they'll get the components, and then basically all I have to do is send the lens materials. Okay, so back to Photoshop really quick. Well, not really quick, we're going to sit here and work on it. I want to go ahead, now that I've got my basic mask ref layer, and I'm going to go ahead and drag another ruler line over here and kind of figure out the middle of the mask. I got like super lucky with this picture that I took, because I've already worked on this. I've worked on this pattern 2 days ago after the stream. I kind of couldn't help it. I wanted to go in and work on it, and so I actually went in and already cleaned up a version of the file. That's this one right here that I've got sitting in front of me, and you know, it's like the very first baby steps towards the file, and you know, I can tell that there's way too much surface area here on the side of the face. There's not enough of a dart under the chin, and so it kind of pokes out and looks wrinkly on the chin. The webbing segments are like twice as thick as they need to be. So all really valuable information. So going back to how we do that, how we get there. Anyway, yeah, I got super lucky with my picture that I took here, my reference photo, and you might you might not have been so lucky as to have, like, seriously, I just got super lucky in that it almost perfectly lines up at the top as it does on the bottom. It does a lot of crazy waviness in the middle, but that's a component of when you're pressing those curves down. Sometimes, you know, if you do a middle line, sometimes it'll go one way or another, so it'll kind of wave back and forth. So you need to kind of just plow through those kind of differences in the curve and find that middle line on it. Cool, so if you weren't lucky and you had to edit that, all you do is do Control T again. You can't see T on my keyboard, but Control T for transform. And over here, it's kind of difficult for you to see. I'll zoom way in so you can see it. There's this little center point marker, and if you click on it, it moves it. It actually moves it around, and sometimes when you're just starting out with Photoshop, that can be frustrating because you'll try to move your selection, and this thing will get selected and move around if you don't know what you're doing with it. But what that does is it controls the point of transformation. And so I'm moving that right down to like the baseline down here where the center lines up. So like, say my file is crooked a little bit. I'll just go ahead and make it kind of crooked. So my file is a little crooked. The first thing I would do is I'd kind of line up that line with one point down here. So I've got that middle line lined up with the bottom down here. And you can also hold Alt, I believe, and that will just go ahead and select that automatically when you click nearby it. I would grab that point transformation and, you know, line it up with this central point with this line and the file underneath. And if you move your transformation around, that point sticks where it's at. So you can kind of refine it that way. And now I would be able to back up a little bit. Maybe not that far. That's good if you're wanting to see the whole image. And if you just click off of your transformation here, if you look at my mouse cursor here, I have a rotation icon now. So you just click anywhere off of your transformation and it's going to rotate it based on that anchor point you dropped there. And so now, you know, I basically just straightened it back up. I'm going to go ahead and if you hit this cancel button, you've got the OK button and the cancel button after transformations, and you can just hit one or the other, or you can just hit escape and enter. You know, there are keyboard shortcuts for basically everything in Photoshop, and if there isn't, you can probably set one. And if you're doing a lot of work in Photoshop, which dye sublimation patterns are, it's good to learn that stuff because you'll save a lot of time with that. And that goes for pretty much any program. When you learn those shortcuts, you save a lot of time. Okay, so basically, let's say that you've just done. I'm going to move these. Oops, I just kind of changed the nature of that line. I'm going to actually just get rid of those. So if you take your ruler lines and drag them back up to your ruler, that gets rid of them. You can probably press delete or something too and get rid of them, but that's just what I do. Cool. So basically, it's time for the path tool. A lot of people, if you have like cursory experience with Photoshop, you probably have experience with, you know, paintbrush tool and erase tool, and you know, you can do a selection, and then you can do a, oh wait, that selection didn't stick. You can do a selection, and then you can paint into that selection. Like, that's very Paint, you know, Microsoft Paint type stuff. I did that all on another layer. Also, you know, I got into layers a little bit here, but you've got things down here at the bottom, like you can make a new layer, which is what I clicked. It's just this little layer, or piece of paper icon, basically. And then also you can make a new folder, which is going to be important later on, especially for dye sublimation, because when you have a ton of layers, you want to be able to make these folders and consolidate everything. I actually have a major problem. See, I tried to delete that layer and it wants to delete, ask me if I want group and contents, but I know there's nothing in there, so just select yes. Delete that layer I created just now. I'm hitting M, which is the quick tool for this selection tool. That gets you those marching ants that really only allow you to work in that area. If you right click, you can select inverse. That's kind of important to know. But anyway, getting rid of that. Now it's time for paths. Um, Basically, I think a lot of people are afraid of paths. The path tool is this pen guy right over here next to my head right now. You click on that and you get this pen, this ink pen looking tool that creates these crazy points and creates this crazy shape that a lot of people really struggle with because, oh man, how are you going to make any kind of shape out of that? Like, oh, whoops, I clicked on one and it deleted it. Like, it's really, I can see why people have their hesitations about paths. To make these paths more visible right now, I'm going to go ahead and change the opacity of my mask reference layer down to like 40, I'd say. And so that's going to hopefully make these paths that I'm making a little more visible to you. I could probably also change some of my Photoshop settings so that my paths would be a little more visible as well, because that still is pretty invisible. I'll go ahead and bring my reference even further. There we go. So that you can kind of see the paths under there a little bit. So anyway, it's a crazy tool that makes these kind of hard to deal with things, and then it's like, well, what do you even do with that? So you go over to this Paths tab, and that path we just created was added over here as a blank work path. And paths are even more important than layers, that you have to double click on it and rename it. You have to rename it. This is crazy path because it's crazy. You have to rename paths, because if you have a path named work path and you make another path, well, that one's path 1, which is fine. But sometimes if you get another work path, it'll just delete the old one. It took me a long time before I realized that. I had a lot of paths that would just randomly disappear, essentially. You'd just be like, what? I knew I had a path for that shape, and it was gone. Because if you create a new path, like if you paste a path and it just creates work path in italics, it will delete the old one, which is crazy. And another crazy thing is that there are no folders. There's no folder option for paths. Someday, I hope that there is that option or a plugin or something. Maybe there is and I just don't know about it. But there should be some way to organize these paths, but there isn't. So you have to really be careful. You want to name them in clear, definite names. So when you select it, the path shows up. If you press outside, it goes away, which is important, because if you have a path selected at all, like this one is right now, and you do, say I'm working on this image underneath, and I'm not even thinking about this path, and I want to select a portion of this image underneath and hit Control Copy and hit Control V, it seems like nothing happens. That's another thing that probably will frustrate a first-time Photoshop user. Well, it's not that nothing happened, it's that you copied your path. Even if the path is only just selected and visible on the scene, you end up copying it. So you always want to deselect your paths when you're not working on them, make them disappear. Because another thing that's even more insidious than that is if you're working on something and say you have a path open somewhere else on the file, and you're working, say, up here, and you want to delete whatever is on this layer, and you don't realize you have your path selected from earlier, you hit delete, guess what? It deleted the path. It didn't delete what was in there, and you might not notice. You might just think, oh, well, it's weird that it didn't delete what I wanted it to delete right then, because then if you hit delete again, oh, there we go. Now it deleted what I wanted it to delete. So that's, I think, another easy first-timer mistake, is that if you have that path at all selected like that, so we're going to go back, Control-Alt-Z, and then you don't notice it, and then you aren't able to Control-Z. You've gone too many strokes. Your Control-Z will only go back a set number of steps, and I think usually it's around 30 steps, because it has to store that on your computer's memory, and so anything higher, unless your computer is pretty powerful, it really starts to bog it down and make it act crazy. But you might want to set those steps higher so that you can do that in Edit, Preferences, and then General. I think it's under General in there. But that's how you would increase your steps. I think I've increased my steps at some point so that you can Control Z way far back. You don't hit that limit and realize, uh-oh, well, this is my pattern now. And so that's a kind of a PSA on not having your paths deleted. Another thing, so since we're kind of just going through Photoshop fundamentals here through this whole stream, another important thing to remember is always save frequently. Okay, so we've already made this new file, and I've been a little bit distracted by the stream. One of the first things you want to do is go in and save as. Don't hit save, because then it'll just save it as the photo that you opened up. You know, it'll kind of go over that, or since it's a Photoshop file, it'll probably prompt you to create a new file no matter what. But save as, and I'm going to go ahead and name it this MCU Mask Pattern Stream 1. And I put that 1 on the back because, or actually, you know what, I'll go ahead and demonstrate. I put that on the back because then I can say 2 for the next time I save. You don't always have to do this every time you save, but the good thing about saving multiple files like this is what I was just talking about earlier with having, you know, a path be deleted like that. If you're saving alternate files every now and then, you have a little bit of a emergency backup of your path is probably still on one of your previous files. And so say I accidentally delete this path and I can't go back far enough to get it back. It's not gone forever. You just go to File, Open, open the first stream, and then I've got this, already have this whole path for the Spider-Man mask here done. These are all the paths for the webs and the outline and everything. And I'd be able to just pull it and copy it, and then go back to my new. These aren't the same dots per image, so this is going to look different scale. But boom! Now I've got it on this new file. You can copy and paste. Oops. You can copy and paste. If you hit A, I hit A just now. That gets to either entire path selection. That black arrow means it's selecting the entire path here, and it's been pasted inside of the crazy path layer. That means you have selected the entire path layer, but if you hold Control, that gives you the ability to go to this white mouse button. So while I hold Control, it turns white. And if I select while I've got that, it'll switch modes. So now when I let go of Control after having selected that, it'll stay in the white mouse cursor. And that allows me to select individual paths. And that's pretty important, going between those two modes and knowing about those two modes. So I'm only selecting this corner path right here. You can see here that I've done some advanced stuff, and then I've got a corner here with 2 different directions of curve. So we'll talk about that right now. I'm holding Control, and I select it, and that selects everything that I just put in there. That path was a little crazy. I accidentally combined a couple different paths. So if you know anything about Photoshop, you might have thought that one looked a little weird, but that's why. Okay, so back to Crazy Path here. You saw that all of my lines are super wacky. I've selected it with the black mouse cursor, and I'm going to go ahead and hold Control and select it with the white one. And so you see, with the white mouse cursor, I can select these curves, but you know, I'm just editing everything, and it's just these dumb big old curves. So you might be wondering, well, how do you make complex shapes? And the truth is, you can make every shape with these pen tool points. Vertices, essentially. These are basically vertices, like if you're working in a 3D program. Basically, if you're wanting to do any shape, you're able to move that curve in, and so like I just made a kind of harsh shape there, and then as you move it out, it forces it to follow that shape of that curve. And what that does is it allows you to make these really nice, consistent sort of shapes that aren't super weird or wobbly. And then also, say you were trying to make this shape on with the brush, you basically can make it with the brush and you can edit it and stuff, but you don't have this freedom of control of going in and moving different things around. I'm just doing really simple movements here to just kind of illustrate that you can edit things and, you know, change the things that you've done. And say I don't want this loop-de-loop up here. If you right-click, you can delete that anchor point, and also delete this anchor point. And you see it also messes a lot with the overall shape. Sometimes you can actually just select the line itself and move it. That's kind of a quick transformation tip, is you just select the line itself, and it's actually moving based on both points, based on where your mouse is going right now. So there, boom, got a nice clean shape. I can refine it a little bit. I can even move this one down, because I'm making like a sort of little lake shape right now, like for a golf course. Maybe I'm making a little golf course, you know, graphic from above, and I want this to be the shape, a nice shape of a lake, like no really hard curves or anything. This figure 8 doesn't really make sense in that context. So that's like super basic path stuff. And as you can see up here on the right hand bar, go back to the paths tab. So I've got layers and paths. There's channels in between. I don't know anything about channels. I'll tell you that right now. I've never used channels. I don't know anything about channels. I've always been like, I should probably learn stuff about channels, but I just don't know anything about it. Never needed to use them or anything. I'm sure people out there watching. Oh, hey, Will chimed in. Hey, Will, thanks for viewing. He's out on the road doing work. I forgot to mention that this is another one of those streams where just kind of running everything alone. That's why I had a bit of a delay getting the keyboard set up and Photoshop and all that. So thanks for tuning in, Will. But anyway, so back to paths here. You got your layers, and now we're back to paths. I deselected Crazy Path here, and it's no longer there. Select it again, and now it's here. So I've made a nice little like little golf course pond here, and so I'm actually gonna call it golf course pond, if I can remember how it's called. Course, not course, like coarse sandpaper. And I'm actually going to start a new layer here, and I'm going to do pond beach, and I'm also going to do the pond itself. And this is just an explanation, like this is kind of similar to a tutorial video that I watched that just kind of like went into what path tools are and what you can do with path tools essentially. So it's a nice little like demonstration. So since we're doing a beach here, I'll take a nice like sand color. It's kind of like a you've got your active colors here. You've got your primary color and then your secondary color behind it. If you hit X, it actually just automatically switches between the two. This little back and forth button will do the same thing. And if you select it, you get a little bit more control over the actual color. So we'll make it a little more brown and sandy, like a beach. And so what you can do, go ahead and select the brush tool. We want to make like a nice little outline for this beach. Make it like an inch or a quarter inch around half an inch around the entire pond. So I'm making the brush size exactly an inch here. And one of the cool things you can do with paths, basically one of the main reasons that it's so great, is down here at the bottom you have some options. You can fill the path, which is a really valuable tool, or you can stroke the path with either, if you have a brush selected or an eraser selected. You can actually erase by stroking. So here you can see that it created this consistently thicker outline around. And if this were a Spider-Man costume and I was creating a pattern piece, I basically created the pattern piece. The path only represents the pattern piece itself, but with that little trick of doing the stroke around the edges, I've created my seam allowance essentially here. When you're creating a pattern, you always want to have material on the outside of where your seam is, so that if whoever is sewing it accidentally goes off a little bit, it's not white right away that is exposed. And so that is how I typically create my seam allowances. And because I used an exactly 100 pixel brush here, I press B to go to my brush quickly. Because I've used an exactly 100 pixel brush in a document where there are 100 pixels per inch, I know that that outline around the edges is exactly 0.5 inches. And so I do that a lot for when I'm designing patterns. Okay, so now that I've done that little outline around the exterior, I hit A, and I get my, every time you zoom in and out, you kind of exit the image and go into like Photoshop menu mode, and so sometimes you'll hit stuff and it'll open menus. You just need to click back into the document, and then you'll be able to use your quick tools and stuff. So I hold Control, and that allows me to select just the whole shape of the pond. And remember, I did the beach on this layer, and I want to do the pond part on this separate layer. And so basically, I can select a nice blue watercolor here, and then just do the fill tool. And so boom, made a nice little golf course pond super easily. And that's basically the key to doing pattern stuff. Another thing you can do is, let me back up and get rid of that, is you can make your path into a selection. It allows you to feather, and what feather means is that it kind of softens the edges of your selection so that it's kind of transparent, and it can just fade into whatever's below it, really smooth and nice. I don't want to do any feather right now, or maybe one or two usually is a good thing to go with. It makes your edges kind of clean and less pixely, but I'm just going to go with 0 for right now. And so now I've just got a selection. The path is not selected right now, so I've just got a selection like if I were to be using the lasso tool or the box tool. So that complex shape, now I can do lots of different things. Like I can go over to the bucket, and if you go over to these tools in Photoshop, a lot of times there's secondary options. Like for the bucket, I'm going to do this gradient. And right now it has a gradient set on both of these colors I've got selected. So I'm going to hit X to change my other color, my secondary color, to more of like a deep blue. And then there's some gradient tools up here, like this circular gradient. I'm going to go ahead and do that one. And what the gradient tool will do, I'm going to change my colors around because I think that makes the center the lighter blue. What the gradient tool does, you draw this line, and right now you're defining the gradient. You're defining how long the transition is and in what direction. But for a circle, there is no direction. It's just how long the gradient is and where it starts from. So look at that, nice and smooth, like that's like a graphic. So really the path tool is just one of the most key tools, and we could also now go ahead and go back to our brush and make a nice smaller effect, like I'm changing it to 10 pixels here, and you can change the hardness too. You can make it kind of soft around the edges. And I'll go ahead and select black here, and just, well, also I'm going to hit M really quick. That's what I'd hit for that quick tool, and I'm just clicking again to unselect what I have had selected. And the tool is still selected. Remember, if you don't have the brush or eraser or whatever selected that you want to be able to do stuff on, it's just going to do like a kind of really thin approximation, just as large as the path itself is. You can see that that's just like totally pixelated line. So if you have that happen, that means that you're just not in like the brush. Until the brush is selected, it will only stroke like the characteristics of whatever tool is selected for some tools. So there you go, got a nice little outline going for that that little pond shape. And then also, so go to the erase tool really quick here to show you, or the eraser. It's make it like some smaller pixel there, and then once I hit the stroke tool, it actually erases underneath down to the beach layer. And so when I hide that, you can see that it actually creates that little gap. And that's actually how I did my webs for the test pattern I did about a day ago. So we're going to be doing that coming up in a second here. So I don't need this layer, I don't need this path. That was just kind of a little informative thing. So next up is kind of how do you do some of these more um, intricate shapes with the path tool. I'm starting up here at the very top center. You know, you're only really ever working on half of the design. I don't need to sit here and build the entire outline. I only need to do half from this middle line I built. Because that, you know, that's the glory of working on a computer. You're not having to physically do both halves of the body, because the computer can just mirror everything over. That's why I've become a big proponent of 3D printing. So I'm starting this path. I'm drawing it out so it has some curve to. It's going to have the ability to curve to it. And I'm holding Shift. While holding Shift, it gives me the ability to stay flat with the direction that the path is going in. It can go 45. It can go flat. You know. So I want it to stay flat. That way I know that that shape I'm making will come to like a nice curved edge because it's a flat point right there, but that's where it'll come together in the middle with the other half of the shape. And so I've done that, and it has a little bit of the curve to it already. And so I'm going to go over to this next corner. You can barely see it, but that's because you want to be able to see your path, and if you can see your background too well, your paths become really hard to see. So I'm dragging it along again, and I'm not worrying too much about what is right coming off of the mask, what's like right beyond it. I'm worried about what is, you know, further past, the stuff that's this direction. And another quick thing, while you have the pen tool selected, I hit P. P is the quick button to get to the pen tool. While you have the pen tool selected, this is really important to know, you hold Control and it turns into the selection tool. And this is really important because while I'm holding Control, I have the selection tool here, and I'm able to move these curvature points around and edit them. And that's important because it's important to be able to do that. So I'm holding Control and Shift after I've selected it, and that's keeping it on its straight, flat axis here. And I've created a good like approximation of that shape underneath, because that's what we're doing here. And then also you hold A and you can move that point you've just placed, which is very important. So I'm bringing that in a little bit. We don't want the corner exactly like this pattern underneath. I've already made my test pattern a lot like we're doing it right here, and what I've learned is that I need to cut inward a lot. The spandex stretches a lot, and if you don't plan it to stretch, it looks baggy and wrinkly. So that's one of the difficult aspects of designing a print. So I know that this shape, this pattern outline that we've been dealing with is way too big. So it has a lot of trimming up that needs to be done. So here's interesting path moment number one. We've got a corner here. A lot of people might be confused, like, oh well, how do you get that corner? Every time I try to edit that shape, I mean, you could really like kind of try to flub it by bringing it in like this, and but then this is moving all around, and then you'd have to edit like that. Like if you're really self-taught, I could see someone doing that. But the reality is, what you can do. So I've unselected from the path. So anything I do here is new. You see, I've created a new point and it's not selected there. What you have to do is you have to go and click on the old one, and you'll see a little square next to your pen tool there, and that reselects you into that path edit mode. And so what we need to do to go on this corner here is hold Alt when we select this point here. And you're going to need to select the point again. It's already selected, but you can see next to the pen tool right there, there's that little pizza wedge shape next to the pen tool. And what that means is that it allows you to independently reset that curve. And so boom, we've just made a corner. And also what that means is now those two points are totally independent of one another. I'll go ahead and make my next point here. Since that's selected, it'll just create another point. And I'm going to drag it along a little bit to get it to be a nice smooth shape while I'm editing it. But now I can still hold Control, and so I'm able to edit that point. I'm able to I have so much freedom now. You know, whenever I edit this curve, it doesn't even touch this last one, and vice versa. When I edit this, it doesn't even alter this. And so this is key. Once you have this path, once you have the outline, like I have it on this other one, I can just edit every little point, and I did already a lot to get a pretty nice consistent shape, because you can always tell, you know, the nicer consistent shapes are what create the better patterns, but I know that there's a lot of stuff that needs to be trimmed down. Basically, an inch of surface area needs to be taken off of the mask on both halves, and so a lot of trimming and resizing has to be done there. But continuing on with paths, I've got this one selected, and you know, I'm continuing on and basically just lining everything up, and I go down to wherever I want to end that line, and basically once again Alt, and that gives me that little pizza wedge shape when I'm selecting this, and that just lets me totally edit the forward aspect of that line. So I'm bringing it all the way up, even back towards the one that was done before, and that gives it the ability. So I'm finding when you're picking places for points, you want the most general major areas for the shape of the outline, and so I'm picking kind of that high point up there, that highest most point. I accidentally right clicked there while I was doing that. So hold Alt to reselect that. And see, I'm only resizing that other size. They don't, once you're out of that placement method, they don't resize similarly, probably unless you hit some button and hold it. But I've never needed to. So okay, so there you go. You can see that I've kind of started to create that shape. Maybe though you're going to find yourself in situations. I've just deleted that innermost shape. So say I hadn't added that first shape, and I was really having trouble. You know, I actually probably could create that shape just based on those 2 points. See, I basically did just. You can really get simplistic, especially when you've just got two points. And the good thing about that is that's a really nice curve that's just based on the strength on either edge, so you know it's not inconsistent based on some point in the middle. But say I wanted to add that point in the middle, you just make sure that that line is selected, and then yeah, so I'm holding Control, and I've got that line selected, and you've got your pen tool here. Now you can see there's a little plus on it. When it's a little X like that, that means it's a brand new point that's being made. When it's a plus, that means you're creating a new point on a line that's already been created. And so I create that point, and you can see it's edited the curve on this and on this one. If I undo it really quick, they used to be a lot larger, but then when I added that point, it gave that point an automatic curve, and it also lessened the curves on these ones back to kind of closer to what I already had. And so now I've got this new point that I can edit and move around. And also, you can go in and hold, while you have the pen tool selected, hold Alt, and you see I've got that pizza wedge shape tool now. That allows you to totally change that connected shape into a free form shape. So like say you're saying making a web shape pattern. That V basically is exactly what you need to get that web shape pattern of those 2 points together. And that comes into play a lot when you're making Spider-Man costumes. Is this V, this pen shaped V that has been disattached, you know, unattached because of Alt. I'm holding Alt, I'm holding Alt again, but it doesn't matter because it's already been disassembled. Now, if you hold Alt again, and this one's already been taken apart, and click it, it brings it back together. It actually totally eliminated the points. So if you hold it again, now it's a reconnected point, and you're making a reconnected shape with it. And then once again, hold Alt, and you can edit it, and you know, you can kind of make a very basic pattern that way. So I'm holding Control Alt Z, and I'm just stepping all the way back before I did any of that. Okay. So back to the outside of the outline, you just make sure you have that point selected, and now since we're just kind of doing a bigger curve, all you have to do is add these points in certain areas. like so. Just kind of editing their shape by holding Alt, or sorry, holding Control. You can see it above me. That's always going to be honest to what buttons and things I'm hitting. I bet that scrolling flashing button is annoying. I just kind of realized that because I scroll a lot. So holding Alt to make this into a corner, and then just going straight over to the next corner, and I've made a pretty nice masked neck curve, although it's going to want to go at a slightly more flat angle right there, and so I think, you know, your shoulder's more up right around here where the mask seam is, and then this is kind of more down on the front of the neck. So once again, holding Alt to give it a corner shape and edit the whatever that line is called. I'm sure that line has a name, I just don't know what it is. Edit that line, and that's what allows you to create those corner shapes. Also, I'm kind of just doing this as a habit, but a lot of times you do want the points to be kind of near where your webbing segments are going to be, because in Spider-Man costumes especially, they throw in a lot of pattern changes, like directions of darts and things like that on webbing segments, because that's a kind of a natural place to put a corner or a change in direction, versus in between webbing segments where you kind of have this weird shaped cell. It looks better to have one rhombus shaped cell above and then another rhombus shaped cell below than a cell that has like a weird bulge on it because the curve is kind of going by in the middle of it. So that's kind of a rule of Spider-Man patterns, is that you'll find things like that always kind of like where the webbing segments meet. So now we've almost done the full mask pattern. I knew from while I was making the pattern that the chin part was a little too wide, but I just went ahead with it anyway, and then I made my test mask, and it's still definitely too wide. But that's good, because that kind of demonstrates the process of, right now I'm just trimming a lot of that off, because I just know for a fact that it wants to be a more streamlined shape like that, ultimately because of the spandex and the way it stretches. And so once again, I'm finishing in the middle here. I'm not going all the way over to the edge, because all of this at the end just gets mirrored and flipped over. There's probably even a modifier that you can put on that mirrors it all in real time, but I've never been able to figure that out. Okay, and so once you have that, you'll notice over here it's named work path, and I'll say, do not ever leave a path named work path, because it's confusing for one. But then if I were to start, so I've got this named work path, and I've deselected it, and I start working on, say, the back. Bye bye front, it's gone. That's a thing. Photoshop actually does that. It's gone forever. I hope you realize in time, because your work just was lost. So that's another good reason why you should save often, and you can just hit Control S to quickly save. Save often, and then always. So I'm satisfied. A good rule of thumb is, if you're ever satisfied with something you've just done, like, I just made a good clean shape, save. Just save then. Save and rename and things, and then you won't lose work so much. So this is the mask front outline. Actually, you know, since I'm teaching you about how I work, this isn't actually just the mask front outline. That comes later. This is actually the mask sketch. I like to start with all of the paths together in one sketch, because what ends up happening after you've put most of your paths down is a lot of like shifting around and switching around of shapes and things, of like the outline and of the webs, and it's easy to pick the pieces apart later and make a specific outline shape. Like if you look at this one I've already worked on, I have the mask outline, I have the web rows, I have the web columns, I have the lens outline, I have the back outline, and I started with a sketch of just all of it. It's easy to pick all of that apart, and then when you're starting with just a sketch of everything, you're able to, you know, I know that this web segment starts right on the line that I placed as the outline. Otherwise, you'd have to do a paint stroke to that outline in order to see it. And so that's why I'm not really in favor of doing that. And so we're just going through and editing again. And you know, that was really, I know that from the work I've done on the front mask that needs to move down a little bit. That's basically just the foundation of that web. And then I'm going to do this inner little shape for the central spot. I don't know what you call that. The little central part of the web. I'm going to do that separately so that they can be edited separately. And then I know it comes right up to the center line. Oops. See, if you hold the control with most tools, you can edit rulers, but you're holding control when you're editing pen points. So sometimes that can be a little annoying. But you just have to hold A, and now, shoot, I did it again. So there we go, because you know you have to switch between the black and the white selection tool. But since it's just totally selected on the, you can also select that over here. You know, you have the difference between the path select and direct select. That's what it's called, direct selection. So now I can edit that point without worrying about grabbing that middle line. And if I had snap enabled, oh, snap is enabled, I just didn't even notice. So yeah, it's probably snapping to that middle line. When you have snap enabled and you have a ruler like this, any points you're moving or things like that are probably going to want to snap to that ruler line, which is good if you have a middle line like this, because everything has to come right up to that middle line. But it can get really annoying when you start doing more fine work, because you'll try to be moving a point and it'll be snapping around to a bunch of little points right around where you want it to go, and you don't realize that that is the reason why. So there we go. That's kind of the first little introduction to creating webbing. I made the first little web column line. I'm kind of breaking them into columns and rows. I've never had to do that before, but this suit definitely has a distinction in the webbing. If you've looked at any kind of reference photos here, this is a good one. The reason I'm breaking it into columns and rows is this is a column line, as I'm kind of describing it right now. This is a web column, and then this is a web row. The columns have this kind of like little gap inside of them, a little recessed area that's like a little glossy, and then the rows are just a singular line. So that's the way I'm going to probably differentiate, is columns and rows, even though it's way more complicated than that, because they're going sideways right here. So technically that would be rows and this would be columns. But you know, I think that kind of simplifies the distinction. So that's what I mean, is columns and rows. And if you don't know that, you need to learn about Microsoft Excel. Okay, and so to just continue on with making these web shapes, you might think, well, in the beginning, I didn't really touch on it too much, but you'll notice that I don't really have the web shapes in my reference image here that we made the other day. I just used those strips of duct tape. You know, this is that image just straight up from above that we took. I just used those strips of duct tape and pulled them tight along the shape of the mask, and I didn't really factor in like the webbing shape, like the kind of bump webbing shape. You can do that towards the beginning, but it's really difficult to kind of figure out the general shape of it while you're also creating that webbing shape. So I like to first create kind of just spherical, a lot like a 3D model. A 3D model has kind of a grid all over the surface, just like this. It's an interesting spelling of hi. Hi person whose name I can't read because it's in another language. Anyway, you know, it looks a lot like a 3D model in that it just has the grid that comprises the shape of the 3D model. And I think that's a really easy way to sort of create that consistent shape all over Um, but then when you're doing your pen tool here, I'm on my mask sketch. So this shape here just kind of went across. It looks really jumbled because there was a lot of crunching that happened in the forehead area in order to get the stretched out area of the forehead to kind of match the not so stretched areas on the side of the head here. So I'm starting with this web here, and I kind of just have to guess what the smoothest curve there is, but I know that it has to just kind of go straight into the middle line in order to maintain a good shape over the top of the head. So I'm starting with a little bit of a downward curve, and then finishing with the same. And you know, if you want to be really consistent, then your little strands here that denote the curvature should be about the same length and kind of at the same angle too. You want to just kind of move everything around until you find the perfect point for that. You hold Alt, and that allows you to, and once again, you want it to be symmetrical. You basically want it to be like little TV antennas or like Martian antennas that are perfectly, you know, symmetrical. Sometimes there are exceptions to that rule. Sometimes there are places where you will have a very I don't know your name, person. Thanks for tuning in from Korea. That's pretty neat. It's probably pretty late or early there. I don't know. Right now I don't have a ton of viewers. I think it's nice because you know I'm trying to be as consistent as possible with this stream, and you know I think with that and covering the projects we're going to cover in the next couple of weeks, and then some of the things I have working beyond that, it's going to be pretty. I think the stream's going to look a lot different in a couple months from now. So I really am kind of treasuring these first initial streams. This is the 9th stream I've done so far in March. I started on March 1st. And it's incredible that I've already made 9 streams, and I think just thousands and thousands of minutes of content, more content than I've ever made on YouTube, definitely. And so I'm really enjoying it, and you know I think it's going to be a lot different in a couple months. So I look at these early streams, and I think they're going to be kind of endearing in the future. Okay, so back to putting these webs down. You know, another note I'll say here is that when you're making this webbing shape, you'll see that I basically have lined up with one edge of the duct tape, which is about 1/4 of an inch thick, on the points, and then have lined up on the other edge with like the bulge shape of the web. That just kind of consistently like evens out. It's like even though it's making that web shape, it still evens out over the shape of that duct tape I did initially. Oops. So you can see I accidentally still had that line selected, so oops, excuse me, Control Z, and I'm holding Control to deselect now, and then it just, when I let go of Control, it goes back to the pen tool, and hold here, and then a new one over here, and it didn't even want to add a point on that line because it won't do that unless that line is actually selected. So it's not selected, so I don't really have to worry too much about that. So this blue line is the middle line. You can see my middle line on the model here got crunched. It definitely really got crunched and folded over to the side. But like I said, your middle line might kind of skew back and forth because of that crunch down when it's eliminating that curvature. You just kind of have to guess. You know, you just kind of have to guesstimate where the best point for that would be. So now when I get rid of, oh, you know what I'll do? I'll go ahead and add a layer of black. That'll really make that visible. So now you can see even better. Just the the nice kind of consistent shape that we're making now, and it's even easier now that we don't have the reference photo to kind of be there and kind of clouding your judgment on what is going to work. Now you're just looking at this outline you've made, and this is like for when you're a little further on and you've created most of your webs. I've already done this for my mask pattern. You can see, okay, so there's more space between where these two webbing segments start than there is here in the middle. And that is definitely the opposite of the way it should be, especially with the middle of the head. That's probably because of the way it crunched down and all of that. And then also, you've got a kind of shorter distance here and then a much longer distance right here. That's the kind of stuff that you don't want to leave in your final pattern when you're doing this stuff. So I selected that webbing end, and when I hold shift, it locks it to that up and down movement on that ruler there. It would just be up and down even if there wasn't a ruler. And you want to just kind of continue to edit it, and then maybe even this one comes in and down a little bit. And then I think maybe this one comes out just a little bit, because you want to just kind of, constantly refer to your reference here and shape that pattern and those webs. Did I miss? Yeah, I must have missed the web. Yeah. Well, so that's why you want to save that step until after you've, fully added all of your webbing, and then it disappears off here, off into the frame. And a lot of times when the webbing segments disappear into the frame, they disappear in the middle of their arc. They're not curved up right underneath the frame. So you kind of have to do a half segment of webbing when you're disappearing off behind a frame like that. So yeah, basically you have that as reference. And another thing I like to do really quick, since I'm at the point where I'm needing to look at my reference here a lot, based on the work I'm doing on the pattern, I'm going to take this and take my selection tool. This is an entirely another image. I'm selecting them based on these tabs of the different images up here at the top. Just going to go ahead and select his head and his mask here. Control copy, and then go ahead and paste it up above the reference image layer, and hit V. When you hit V, that goes to moving a layer, the layer moving tool. And so now I've kind of got this constant reference image just floating up near my work. It's really helpful for, you can turn it off. It doesn't. If you look at my Photoshop files for all of the ASM patterns, they're just littered with little reference images like this all across, because it's easy when you're just sitting here working on this. If I have it right there, I can tell pretty easily, okay, here, I'll go ahead and get it in a way that you guys can kind of see what I'm doing. Okay, I can tell for sure that this needs to kind of cut that distance equally a little bit more. And it's a little harsher of a bump here. I kind of have it a little too soft. It might even be a little higher up still. But this is work I've already done on. And also, I think maybe just this whole webbing line needs to kind of bulge to the side more. So now I need to edit that segment and all of them really to realign. You always want to remember, if you edit a webbing segment going in a different direction like that, you really have to remember to go through and move all the points. There might be a way to lock them together. That might be worth looking into. I've never thought about that. So yeah, that's a pretty good initial pattern. Maybe this is going up a little bit more. Yeah, that's some good first steps. It probably looks a lot like the one I've done for this one already. Because I've already gone through, I've done that with the side, I've done that with the chin, I did that with the back. And once you have done that, I created this whole pattern, with the paths and everything, and then I did the stroking, what you do with stroking a path in order to do a brush stroke on top of it. I did that a couple of times until I had a good outline of what the pattern looks like, and my printer is kind of out of ink. But if you can see right here, I actually printed the pattern piece out onto paper. I have one for the center as well. Um, but this is the actual pattern printed out onto paper, and I actually go into Microsoft Paint to print out my patterns, because I've always used Paint to print out stuff, because Paint is excellent at taking a large image. It always opens an image in its actual size. Sometimes Photoshop, it can be a difficulty to get something to print and then print onto multiple pages to create the full-size image. But in Paint, it's actually really easy. You just save your pattern that you're working on. So say you do your brush strokes. Let's say, yeah, we'll go over to this one. Basically, we're skipping ahead here. I've finished all of this design here. You know, I've done all of the webs and outline and everything on both pieces. And what I've gone through and done is I've picked out the front outline, so I have just that path alone. I picked out all of the web rows. And by picked out, I mean I went through with my path select tool, and you can just select individual paths. Like say that's a path or a web row for the back of the mask. And then, you know, select more. You can hold shift and just kind of select a bunch of stuff, and then hold control copy, and then make sure you're unselected from any path, and then control V, and now it says work path, but this actually works as mask back webs. There's only one column line, so I figure it doesn't need its own path. So now here's what you would do once you have all of those paths. So if I'm doing my actual dye sublimation file, you're going to want to find your color, and your image also, I'll go ahead and say, go into image size here, and this is where you're going to find out your image information. Some of your, oh wait, no, that's not right, sorry. It's in, gosh, it's been a while since I've adjusted the CMYK mode. Okay, so you can edit it through this. You change the mode to CMYK color. The reason for this, the difference between RGB color and CMYK color, this is very important for dye sublimation printing. The difference is that RGB color is more for like televisions and displays and things that shine light in order to display their image. RGB works really well for combining light in order to make images. But CMYK is more formulated for printing, for like printed images and posters and things like that. It's more focused on what CMYK stands for is the cyan, magenta, yellow, and I don't know, K, something. Well, I'm not going to do that because it just asked me to merge a bunch of layers. But really, what you should be doing this when you're doing your initial, you can do a new file, a new like pattern file. And so when you do new, it gives you the option to change to CMYK, and it gives you the option to change your resolution. And like I said, when you're doing a pattern file, you want to do I do 100 pixels per inch because you can change it later. You can actually adjust your image so that it is fewer pixels per inch later. Hey Corin, I don't know when you made that comment, but thanks for tuning in. I like your shout outs, guys, every now and then. But anyway, so if like you're making a new pattern, it would be you'd name it and everything here, and then you can also change the size in inches and height and everything. We'll just continue on with this one since it's just kind of a tutorial. So when you're starting out a new, once you finish your paths, you'll have different layers like the mask fill. And so you've got your red color selected. I'm just going to do a super vibrant bright red. Got your mask outline. You'd take your Photoshop brush like I said. It'd be 72 pixels right now, not actually 100. So I know that's I have the hardness down a little bit. Oops. So what you're going to do, make sure that layer is selected. That's a lot of back and forth like that. Make sure that layer is selected and then fill it. And so now what you have is your fill here for like if you're dye sublimating, you have your outline, and then you also have the seam allowance on the side here already printed and everything. And then you go ahead and you do your web effect for your rows. I'm doing webbing that is about 4 pixels wide. You just kind of want to experiment based on your image. It'll be different, and you want to do it, always remember to start a new row, and this will be mask front web rows. And so once again, make sure you have your brush selected, go in, and then you stroke the path. And so now I've got that shape painted on there. For the next one though, because as we've talked about already, he's got this sort of gap that goes up between the webs on these column webs. So what I'm going to do that, it's kind of just a little quick trick. You could definitely do other things. Is I'm going to do a new layer, and so I selected 4 pixels for the width of my webbing. What I'm going to do now is do 8 pixels, and I'm going to stroke those columns like that. So you can see it's thicker, you know, it's a little thicker on those side of the face ones than it is on the straight ones. And you can see also here that it's just gone straight past. That's because it needs to merge with these little dips. Okay, sorry, kind of trying to catch up on comments. There were a couple I missed. So I've done this slightly larger, thicker web, and what I'm going to go ahead and do is make a thinner, fewer pixels. I'd say like, I'll even do like 5. No, probably 4. 4 is probably still makes most sense. And now what I'm going to do, either you can use the same color that you used for the background, and this is good because it masks those webs that are underneath, so it just creates a solid gap. So this is a thinner brush, and it's the color of the mask underneath, and even this should go on another layer, because you really just want to do everything on different layers. The less you do on the same layer, the better, because you can go back and edit it. There we go. So boom. That's the MCU design right there in a nutshell. You've got the nice little webbing gap. Degsy just asked, how do you match colors for a dye sublimation suit? That's a really good question, because it's difficult. Otherwise, if you don't know how to do it, it seems like you basically just have to get a suit printed and guess, and then adjust based on that. What you actually want to do is, most places that do printing will do calibration, or you can get your own. And what calibration is with printing is you print a big color chart. It has a bunch of different colors on it, a really wide range of colors, and it looks a lot like, you know, basically these swatches up here in the corner. You're printing a big sheet. It's a calibration blanket, and you're printing a big sheet with all of these different colors on it in CMYK. You want these colors to be in CMYK on your Photoshop file that you make. And that's like the first thing you probably want to be doing as far as making you know, really good colors. Otherwise, you can guess a little bit, and a lot of times they will, the printer that you deal with will send you a calibration blanket, which means it's like $5 or whatever the cost of the printing. They send the blanket, and then they also send the file with the CMYK coloring that you know, you look at the blanket and the colors, and you look at what you like, and also take pictures of it, because a lot of times, especially with red, the pictures that are taken of the fabric and the color look a lot different than the reality of the color, especially with red. And so I think it's important to take pictures with like cell phone cameras and regular digital cameras and see which colors look best there, because that's where a lot of, you know, people, that's like one of the main ways people are seeing your stuff is through cell phone pictures and regular pictures like that. And then if it's like a professional photography, usually those people are bumping the colors up anyway. So that's the best way to calibrate your colors to get the ideal color of red. I kind of have a set of swatches with my current printer, but it can kind of be a little different based on different things. Cool. So if you're wanting to do the test print now, so now that we've got basically these black lines, if you're wanting to do that test print that I did, all you have to do is you don't want to print all of this red, because that red is going to be an issue, because it'd be a lot of wasted ink. You only need a black and white outline here. You can see that I've got this red outline in the middle here still. You can still see the red gap. We'll want either a white gap or no gap, or you know, nothing inside of that gap. And so what I'm going to do here, if we just ignore all that and go back to the mask I've done already, if you just get rid of the fill and get rid of the white, I've done some white gaps in there. This is a pretty good test template for like printing out and sewing and working on. So what you would do here is take your bounding box, or I think that's what it's called, your selection box, either way, and select right up around your mask shape here. Like get right close to the edges, because this is what's going to be printed, and since it's going to be printed on multiple pieces of paper, you want as close up to the image as possible. So we've selected this area of what we want that will be printed in the bounding box. So what we do is go to Image, and this is a good time to save, I will say. Save the image just in case anything happens. And then we go up to Image and Crop. And so now that selection box that we had is the new size of the image. All the other information that we had, like the back outline, is off of the canvas now. But that's fine, because all we're doing here is going to File, Save As, and when you save, it's going to want to save it as a Photoshop document, meaning just a document that can be opened in Photoshop and still has all the layers and everything. But what you do here is in the format bar, you can select JPEG. You could also select like PNG and TIFF. TIFF is the file for most prints. TIFF has a lot of the really good information for printing. So TIFF is the standard file for prints. But for right now, for the sake of printing out a little test outline, just save it as a JPEG. You can see the original pattern there. Name it as whatever you want. That'll do for fine, or you know, front outline, because you want to differentiate, because I'm only doing the front part here. You could print both on the same file, but since you're having to piece everything together, there's really no reason to do that. Flubdub just asked how old I am and when I started making patterns. I'm 29, and I've been making patterns for like over a decade. I've been, you know, I made a Matrix Neo trench coat pattern in high school, and that was pretty impressive to some of the people that my mom and her friends and stuff. There's like, because making patterns is not the easiest thing in the world, and I was doing it in high school, so. It's kind of just like the nature of my intelligence. I have a very spatial intelligence, and pattern making and geometry like that is very easy for me. So got this saved as the front outline. You save it like that. It gives you some options here on if you want to do like what the quality is ultimately. And it merges all of the layers together and just creates a white image. It's not like checkerboarded like that. It creates just a white flat image. So you just hit OK. You can choose whatever settings you want. And then next up is to find it. So this is that file. If we're back in the File Explorer here, I've got MCU mask pattern front outline. It's actually MISC. I didn't put an A in there. I put two S's. But what I do is open with Paint. And this is so simple and so basic. I've been doing it for so long. I've always just struggled with Photoshop's printing abilities. I'm sure it actually has the abilities to print just like this. But what I do is, since you open it in Paint and you've got the entire image here, it actually keeps all of the size information that you put there in Photoshop. That's saved along with it. So it knows exactly how big that is compared to the scale you have. So what you do is go to Print and Page Setup. This is something I've done for years for printing off like outlines and diagrams and things. What you want to do for scaling, usually it'll try to fit it to one page. It'll shrink it and try to contort it to one page. You want to adjust it to 100% of its normal size. And I'm going to leave it in landscape, but sometimes you want to switch between portrait and landscape. Like portrait's not good right now because you can see right now that it's cutting off a little bit of that envelope shape. You want it in landscape, I do, because that's basically just two or three sheets of paper. And then you also just go to the margins here, and I just enter 0. It'll automatically readjust it from 0 to its minimum margin size that your printer can take. But that's what you want, because you want as little of that margin as possible. And once you've done that, you should probably print preview it just to make sure that, I dislike it when you've got this, just these little tiny bits that are coming off, because they can be just kind of a pain in the butt, but you can't really help it in this situation. So it's going to print on 3 pieces of paper, and you know, once you've checked everything out, you print, you go into your printer settings and everything, and you just hit print, essentially. You know, I've got all of my printer settings, so I could print this right now. I don't need to though, because that's basically what I've got here. And so now, once you've printed your image off into individual layers, you can see here, it's a little difficult to see because the lighting isn't great right in front of the camera. But this is three separate pieces of paper that I've just taped together. You have to be really careful and make sure everything lines up perfectly. But I just tape them together. I trim around the outline. It doesn't have to be perfect. Unless you're going to trace directly, you're going to trace your outline. I don't think you have to trim right along the outline, because then I use my makeshift light board. You can use an actual light board if you have one, but I use my makeshift light board as long as your fabric is translucent. And if you're just doing test files, it should just be on like white spandex or red spandex, whatever is cheapest, because you're just kind of testing right now, because we've just made this file in Photoshop and we don't know how it's going to look yet. Technically, I do actually. That's what this file is right here. This mask pattern on this mannequin head right now. I've already transferred it over and sewed it, and I know for a fact, it's got its arch out here. My printer's kind of running out of ink, so this is not a super dark outline, but I know for a fact that it has about 1 inch of extra material in here. This just needs to be shrunk down immensely, just shriveled a lot, because it needs to stretch out and get tighter when it actually is worn by a person. And that's basically how every one of my mask patterns has always started. You start with the actual size of the template that you've cut off, but because that's the actual surface area and not the stretched surface area of what you want for the spandex, you always have a baggy starter mask. Like this mask is actually pinned in the back. That's how I know that I need to remove about 1 inch of material, is that I had to pin about 1 inch of material on the back before it started to kind of stretch and kind of pull into the shape it's in right now, in a nice cohesive manner. But yeah, and then And then you just need to sew it together quickly. It doesn't need to be a perfect sewing job when you're just kind of doing a test sew to make sure that everything you've done like works well. And once you've gotten to this stage, you've got the test sewn mask and it's on top of the mannequin head and everything. That's when you're that is when you're ready to start like taking notes, essentially. I have a piece of paper here, and the next step for me, essentially, that I've got the pattern in with paths and stuff, and I've also got the mask finished with basically the pattern sewn together. I can start to see like, okay, well, this part here is poking out a little bit too much, and this seam right here is way too wrinkly. It's just too much material that's having to bunch up right there. It's having to stretch too much up here in the top and not stretching enough on the side. So you have to take material away from the side and you have to add it to the top. Because that's the thing about spandex, is if you have too much material on the side and not enough on top, it'll kind of just shrivel and shrink on top and then expand too much on the side. So that's really where the kind of the more difficult aspects of this come into play. And I just have my template lens sitting on top of this thing right now. You need to have something like that to represent your shape of your lenses, because you're also at the same time, I haven't really been doing that since I've already made the shape of my lenses. You're also kind of doing the same process of making a kind of sketch lens and then cutting it up, taking it off and cutting it and flattening it out and then putting it into Photoshop and doing the exact same stuff I was doing with paths, the path tool, in order to make a really clean, smooth shape of a lens. And then you print it out, you put it on, you use spray adhesive. That's what this one is. This is just a printed template, spray adhesive done to a manila folder so that it has some structure to it, and then I cut it out with an X-Acto knife. And so that gives you a nice template for when you're making, the actual lenses and also working on the mask pattern. Cool. All right. Well, does anyone have any questions or anything on creating mask templates or basically the process that we went into there? Because I'm going to be doing the whole suit, the whole MCU suit. I'll have a mannequin and everything that I'll bust out, and it'll probably be standing here, and I'll just do the exact same process I did for the mask portion on the mannequin. And so we'll really beat this process into the ground, and then we'll have a full MCU suit by the end of it. And another reason why I'm rushing to get this mask done is because I really want to get my next version prototype of the moving lenses working in the next week or two, really. Because it's about time that I got that video out, and I'm really excited to have that going. And then it'll be a neat thing to have for future streams. I can put it on and have the moving lenses and everything for the sake of kind of the entertainment factor of the stream. The first one, though, goes to Alex. Alex Magos has been waiting for the moving lens shell for like a year. He's the one who won that first contest, and that's part of why I haven't had another contest since then. I've just gotten so bogged down with orders and dumb stuff like that. My dumb attitude towards it. So that's kind of bogged me down for like the last year. But I think with this stream, we'll definitely be able to plow forward and get some stuff done. Cool. So that was about 2 hours for that stream. I think that was a good intro to Photoshop. Once again, I need to go through and edit down these streams so they're a little more concise and full of information. Or what I also might do is I might make quick reference guides to the streams, so that when the stream starts, like if say you're watching a stream from an archived state, when the stream starts, there'll be like a little table of contents, maybe say like over far on the other side of the screen, like a little table of contents of just those buttons that YouTube lets you put in. And what it would be like part one. So let's say it's this stream, it would be like part one, McLean talks about the last stream. Part two, opening your image in Photoshop. Part three, and then I can make those links just go straight to the time in the stream. And I think that would probably be one of the easiest ways to make the information available for people who are coming back after the fact, versus whereas right now it's kind of like, good luck, you have to sit through these 2-hour streams where I kind of hem and haw quite a bit. It's difficult for me to sit and watch them after the fact, just because it's hard to watch yourself on video as it is, and when it's live I'm sitting here saying every other word. Gets pretty funny. Okay, cool. So that does it for today's stream. Good solid 2 hours of stream action. Probably pick up with that or more sewing stuff. We've done a little bit of sewing stuff with that stream we did a few days ago, so I think it'd probably be good to pick up again in sewing, because I want you guys to know how to do all this stuff. You're going to learn a lot, and then hopefully the viewer numbers will just kind of tick upward as it becomes known that it's just a good resource for consistent, valuable information. So awesome. Thanks again to you guys for tuning in on this Saturday. It's been a nice fun way to spend the afternoon. Should have another stream probably on Tuesday. Another nice little 2-day break for me while I clean my house, as I have family coming in town. Cool. Well, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys on Tuesday.